It's been said that Bigfoot exhibits nocturnal behavior, perhaps to hunt or to avoid detection. But the cloak of darkness couldn't hide the creature in the stunning footage you're about to see.
Imagine spending your entire life mastering survival. Learning how to build shelter from snow, start fires with nothing but sticks, hunt with handmade tools, and stay alive where most people would freeze within hours. Now imagine that person disappearing. Not in a city. Not on a mountain trail. But inside one of the most isolated wildernesses on Earth. A place so vast that rescue helicopters can search for weeks without seeing another human being. What happened next left behind only a torn campsite. A damaged camera. A journal filled with growing terror. And one chilling question. Was Thomas Siebold truly alone in the Alaskan wilderness? The man who feared nothing. On September 15, 2012, 32-year-old Thomas Siebold entered Alaska's legendary gates of the Arctic wilderness. This wasn't an ordinary backpacking trip. Thomas had spent years preparing for environments exactly like this. He knew how to survive in brutal temperatures. He could build emergency shelters from snow. He hunted, tracked animals, started fires without modern equipment. Friends described him as calm under pressure, the kind of person who solved problems instead of panicking. If anyone could survive weeks alone in Alaska, it should have been him. But nature has a way of humbling even the most experienced explorers. And some believe nature wasn't the only thing waiting for Thomas. A land where help doesn't exist. Most national parks have roads, campgrounds, rangers nearby, cell service. Gates of the Arctic has almost none of that. Covering more than 8 million acres inside the Arctic Circle, it's one of the most remote protected landscapes in North America. No highways cut through it. No marked hiking trails guide visitors. Once you're deep enough inside, you're completely on your own. If something goes wrong, there may be nobody close enough to hear you. That isolation is exactly what attracts experienced adventurers. And exactly what makes disappearances here so terrifying. The journey begins. During the first days of his expedition, Thomas seemed exactly as everyone expected. His journal overflowed with admiration. Towering mountains, crystal clear rivers, wildlife roaming untouched landscapes. He wrote that he had never felt more connected to nature. The silence wasn't frightening. It was peaceful. Every sunrise felt like a reward. Every evening reminded him why he'd chosen this journey. For a while, everything appeared perfect. But then, the tone of his writing began to change. Slowly. Almost too subtly to notice. An uneasy feeling. Instead of describing beautiful scenery, Thomas started writing about something impossible to explain. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. At first, he dismissed it. Anyone spending weeks alone in endless wilderness can become hyper-aware of every sound. A snapping branch. Wind moving through trees. The distant call of an unknown animal. Your mind starts connecting patterns that may not even exist. Thomas understood this. He tried to convince himself that exhaustion was playing tricks on him. But the feeling refused to disappear. In fact, it grew stronger every day. Something outside. Then came a night that changed everything. According to his journal, something approached his shelter after dark. At first, he assumed it was another traveler. Maybe someone needing help. Then came the sound. Not footsteps. Not a bear. A deep howl that echoed through the darkness. Moments later, heavy impacts slammed against the outside of the cabin. Again. And again. The walls shook. Thomas later wrote that whatever was outside seemed incredibly powerful. Strong enough to make him question whether the shelter would survive the night. He stayed awake until sunrise. Too afraid to open the door. Too afraid to look outside. When daylight finally arrived, he made a decision. He packed everything he could carry and left immediately. But moving deeper into the wilderness may have been the worst decision he ever made. The feeling returns. His next destination was Chandler Lake, roughly 20 kilometers away. The farther he traveled, the stranger things became. His food supply was running low. Sleep became difficult. And the unsettling sensation returned. Only this time, it wasn't just a feeling. He began hearing distant howls that seemed to follow him. Whenever he stopped walking, the sounds stopped too. Whenever he moved, they returned, as though something was carefully matching his pace. Watching. Waiting. Thomas still tried to explain it logically. Maybe wolves. Maybe bears. Maybe another hiker hidden somewhere in the trees. But then, he discovered something that shattered every rational explanation. Large footprints. Far larger than his own. And nearby, a crude structure built from broken branches. It didn't resemble an ordinary campsite. It looked intentional. Who, or what, had built it? And why did it feel like he wasn't the first person to find it? The answers would only become more disturbing. The figure in the trees. By early October, Thomas had stopped writing like an adventurer. He was writing like a man trying to convince himself he would survive. Every page carried a little more urgency. A little more fear. Then came the journal entry that investigators, and mystery enthusiasts, would discuss for years. While scanning the forest ahead, Thomas noticed what he first believed was a bear. It stood motionless between the trees. But something wasn't right. Bears don't stand perfectly upright for long. This figure did. It appeared unusually tall. Its arms seemed far too long for a human. And despite the distance, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't simply standing there. It was watching him. Not out of curiosity. Not out of fear. But with purpose. He reached for his camera. By the time he lowered it, the figure had vanished. No crashing through bushes. No retreating footsteps. Just gone. A camp filled with silence. Thomas kept moving toward Chandler Lake, hoping distance would solve the problem. Instead, the wilderness became eerily quiet. Experienced outdoorsmen often say silence can be more frightening than noise. Birds stop singing. Small animals disappear. Even the wind seems to fade. Predators often create that kind of silence. Everything else knows they are nearby. Thomas noticed it too. His journal described long stretches where the forest felt almost frozen. No movement. No birds. No insects. Just an overwhelming feeling that something unseen was sharing the same woods. And every night, the sounds returned. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Measured. Never rushing. Never revealing themselves. As if whatever followed him knew it had all the time in the world. The last camp. On October 5th, Thomas finally reached the area near Chandler Lake. He was exhausted. His supplies were nearly gone. That evening he cooked what would become his final recorded meal. A simple dinner. Enough to restore a little energy before another day of hiking. As darkness settled across the valley, everything seemed calm. Until around 10:30 that night. According to his final journal entries, he heard footsteps circling the tent. Not random movement. Not an animal wandering past. These footsteps stopped. Then continued. Then stopped again. Almost as though whoever, or whatever, was outside was studying him. Listening. Waiting. His final written words reflected a man whose confidence had completely disappeared. He wrote that it had returned. That he was terrified. And that he desperately hoped someone would find him. Those would become the last words anyone ever received from Thomas Siebold. The search begins. Weeks passed without contact. When Thomas failed to appear for his scheduled flight home, alarm bells rang immediately. Search and rescue teams launched a massive operation. Helicopters flew over endless valleys. Ground crews pushed through freezing rivers and dense forests. Volunteers searched areas few people had ever visited. For nearly 2 weeks they battled brutal weather, dangerous terrain, and early winter conditions. But Alaska refused to give up its secrets. Eventually, the official search was suspended. Not because people stopped caring, but because surviving those conditions without supplies had become almost impossible. Most assumed Thomas had died somewhere beyond the search perimeter. His body, they believed, might never be found. But his family refused to accept that answer. A discovery that raised more questions. Determined to continue looking, relatives joined park personnel in searching the wilderness themselves. Eventually, near Chandler Lake, they found something. A campsite. Everything suggested it had belonged to Thomas. But it didn't look abandoned. It looked disturbed. Clothing lay scattered across the ground. His sleeping bag had been tossed aside. Personal belongings were spread in every direction. His camera was damaged. His phone remained behind. Nothing about the scene suggested someone had calmly packed up to leave. It looked interrupted. As if whatever happened occurred suddenly. And violently. Yet investigators reportedly found no obvious signs of a struggle. No blood. No clear trail. No body. Only questions. The journal. Among the recovered items was Thomas's journal. Its early pages captured wonder. The later pages captured fear. Reading them felt like watching someone slowly lose their certainty. At first, he admired the wilderness. Then he questioned strange sounds. Later, he described feeling watched. Eventually, he no longer questioned it. He believed something was following him. Whether that something was a predator, another person, or simply the psychological effects of prolonged isolation, no one could say for certain. But one fact remained impossible to ignore. His confidence disappeared long before he did. The camera. Perhaps the most intriguing discovery was Thomas's camera. Reports surrounding its contents have fueled years of speculation. Some claim the images showed little more than remote wilderness. Others insist they included strange silhouettes, unusual footprints, or distant shapes hidden among the trees. No publicly verified evidence has ever confirmed those claims. And because the material has never been fully released, the mystery has only grown. When information is incomplete, people naturally fill the gaps. Some see ordinary explanations. Others see something far stranger. Whatever those photographs truly contained, they became part of a story that refuses to disappear. And the deeper investigators looked into the region's history, the stranger that story became. The legends of the North. Long before maps marked the Alaskan wilderness, indigenous communities passed down stories about mysterious beings said to roam the deepest forests. Descriptions varied from one region to another, but many shared familiar details. An enormous figure. Human-like in appearance. Incredibly strong. Elusive. Rarely seen, yet often heard. For generations, these stories remain part of local folklore. To believers, they were warnings. To skeptics, they were simply legends born from living in an unforgiving wilderness. Because of those traditions, some people quickly connected Thomas's final journal entries to the legend many know as Bigfoot. They pointed to the unexplained sounds, the unusually large footprints, the strange branch structures, the overwhelming feeling that someone, or something, was watching from the shadows. But legends alone cannot solve a disappearance. Investigators had to consider every realistic possibility. The rational explanation. Alaska is among the harshest environments on Earth. A single wrong decision can become fatal within hours. Temperatures can plummet without warning. Fast-moving rivers become deadly obstacles. Steep terrain hides cliffs, sinkholes, and unstable ground. And the wildlife is no less dangerous. grizzly bears, wolves, moose capable of charging without warning. Every year, experienced outdoorsmen underestimate these risks. Could Thomas have encountered a predator? It's certainly possible. Could exposure, injury, or exhaustion have impaired his judgment? Also possible. But there was one detail that continued to trouble many people. The lack of evidence. Predator attacks usually leave traces. Torn equipment. Blood. Scattered remains. Broken vegetation. Yet the area around Thomas's final campsite revealed remarkably little. It was as if the wilderness had simply erased him. A mind under pressure. There is another explanation, one grounded not in monsters, but in psychology. Extreme isolation changes people. Days without meaningful human contact. Constant stress. Poor sleep. Limited food. The relentless awareness that help is impossibly far away. These conditions can distort perception, making ordinary events feel deeply threatening. A distant howl becomes something unnatural. A shadow becomes a figure. A snapping branch feels like footsteps just beyond sight. Many survival experts warn that prolonged isolation can quietly reshape the way the brain interprets the world. If Thomas experienced that kind of psychological strain, his growing fear may have influenced everything he wrote in his journal. But even if that were true, it still doesn't explain where he went. The mystery that refuses to fade. Years have passed since Thomas Siebold vanished into Alaska's wilderness. No confirmed sightings. No verified remains. No final explanation. Only a damaged campsite. A journal documenting an escalating sense of fear. And a disappearance that continues to inspire debate. Some believe he fell victim to the unforgiving wilderness. Others suspect an encounter with a dangerous animal. And there are those who remain convinced that his final days brought him face to face with something science has yet to explain. Without definitive evidence, none of these theories can be proven. And perhaps that's exactly why this case continues to fascinate people. The human mind struggles with unanswered questions. Especially when they disappear into places where almost anything seems possible. Final thoughts. The wilderness has always held two faces. One is breathtaking. The other is merciless. It rewards preparation. But it never guarantees survival. Whether Thomas Siebold was overcome by nature, lost to an accident, or encountered something he couldn't understand may never be known. What remains is a story suspended between fact and folklore, a reminder that even in the age of satellites and GPS, there are still corners of the world where certainty simply doesn't exist. Some mysteries are eventually solved. Others fade into history. And a rare few stay buried beneath the trees, waiting for the next person brave enough to venture beyond the last trail. Because sometimes, the most terrifying thing about the wilderness isn't what we know is out there. It's what we may never know.